Hello and welcome to the Property Management Show. I'm your host, Alex Osenenko. My day job is the CEO of 4.5, a marketing company that works exclusively with fee-based property management companies. I spent the last 7 years of my life helping property management companies become more successful by improving sales, marketing, and operational efficiency. On this show, we'll deconstruct success into its key components and invite subject matter experts to help you improve every facet of your business. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to episode number 33. Great to have you. Thanks for listening. Today we're going to solve another big problem in the space of property management. I have an awesome guest I'm going to introduce in a second. But first, let me introduce some data that I come across from the Iceberg report regarding the opportunity in the property management space. So right now, if in the U.S., there are about 22 million single-family and fourplex, up to fourplex rentals. Out of those 22 million, 14.3 million, or 65%, are self-managed by the investor or the landlord. This gives a vast opportunity to about 32,000 small property management companies out there. So that's how many of you are out there really competing for the business. Having been in property management for 9 years and spending a lot of time in the trenches with my clients and doing conferences and everywhere else, if we follow as a U.S., if we follow the Australian example, in Australia right now, about 70% of single-family similar properties are professionally managed. My hunch is that there'll be another about 8 million single-family rentals coming into the professional management over the next 5 years. Essentially, this means that your portfolio will double by default, right? So you can double your business. In reality, what's going to happen, out of the 32,000 property management companies, there'll be a lot of consolidation, and the best players will get the majority of that growth over the next 5 years. So I think the opportunity is way too big, and this is a great industry to be in. But I think the biggest chasm we have to cross as an industry is to build the trust between the landlords, investors, and the professional management. Right now, that is the chasm, and we got to start building the bridge across that chasm. And I think one of the key things there is the customer experience, right? For both owners and tenants. Some people say, well, tenant is not really a customer, but they are, right? So both tenant and owner experience needs to be improved in order to bridge the chasm. And the only way I know of to accomplish this is to empower your team, right? I always say, this is my motto to my website, happy employees make happy customers, who in turn make happy shareholders, okay? And I have a person here I'd like to introduce as my guest. His name is Adam Hooley. Adam and I met at LPMA conference in Australia and Gold Coast just a few months ago, really. And I sat through Adam's presentation. It was fascinated by the implications. Specifically, Adam spoke about the framework of the high-performing team. So, Adam, it's a pleasure to having you on. Please introduce yourself and tell us what this topic came about and why.
Good afternoon, Alex, and thanks for having me on the show. So one of the things, and I think you've opened with some really good statistics there, and we have the same problem over here in Australia, is that how do we offer true value to our clients? And we have a portion of the market over here that's obviously self-managed. What we're having is also a large portion of the market that doesn't seem to be seeing the value in the property management industry, even though they still have their rental managed by it. So we have some really rich data doing that. So one of the things is that if you can put a high-performing framework into your team, you're driving the decisions down into the team, you've got loyalty out of your team, what you're doing is you're producing a high-performing team for your business, you're engaging the team more, which means they now have a career path and that they are now moving forward to, I guess, present your clients better. So this all came about from me. I dove into the property management industry about 15 years ago. I've been in real estate all my life. And I was in a corporate environment before that with a large business. And I picked up some habits around operating corporately and managing teams and things like that. And when I decided about 15 years ago that I wanted to focus more on real estate, This is where I use those tools to come into real estate and work with real estate businesses to change the way they do things. So this is where these concepts came from. It's about understanding that the real estate was really missing some fundamental concepts about managing these high-performing teams so that they can offer true value to their clients.
Gotcha. And Adam, you said your background is in more of a corporate real estate. Is that correct? And that's where you're taking your experience into maybe a smaller business?
Absolutely. So I worked for a corporate business that was a hybrid around the rural industry, which still had property management and real estate sales and rural property sales, but in much more of a corporate environment. Yeah.
Gotcha. And right now, this concept, was it introduced in the book? I just want to make sure we kind of flesh it out completely. If people want to follow up on this session and read some stuff, is there a way for them to download information on it?
Absolutely. We put together a book which Ben White published, which is called Building Blocks, and it's available online. You can download that for free. And a lot of these frameworks and a lot of these concepts for the high-performing team are basically straight from that book. So we've managed to try and collate the best parts into a quite navigable book.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so I have to give props to Ben White and the thought process that goes into those books. I mean, I have all three of them on my shelf. Every one of my employees, it's a required reading, and in fact, I myself as a 4.5, we're a service business, and we're structured very similar to our clients in terms of delivering service, and in our case, it's marketing. In our customer's case, it's property management. And I already spoke to Adam about this. As a team, we are converting into the squad structure, which is what we're going to discuss today. But before we go to the specifics, Adam, I want to just let's summarize, what does it really solve? I have my own list here that the sort of the targets we're going after. But what does it solve? Restructuring, that sounds like a lot of work to restructure the whole team, rethink the job descriptions, all those things. What does it solve?
So it's a very good question. There's a holistic view of a business, and I think one of the things that I'm working on now is building a consulting framework around a lot of these concepts, because what happens in the past is that often people work on very isolated parts of their business, and you don't get an overall picture of it. So one of the things that happened the other day was a client of mine produced a document showing their commitment to their owners, to their landlord. So it was basically a 3-page document saying we commit to all these service agreements about returning messages and phone calls and commitment to inspections and things like that. However, what they hadn't done was they hadn't worked within their team environment to deliver on that. So in actual fact, the business may have been slightly worse off by producing this document, because now they're making promises to their clients that they actually can't commit to. So what you need to do is, the core of this is to put together a framework for your team. And while you're putting together this framework, you're actually solving 100 other problems within your business. So you're putting together a framework to actually focus on your team, measure KPIs, measure performance of your team, and all that really delivers a better quality product to your clients, so that you can actually now deliver on the commitments that you're making to your clients.
Absolutely. And, I went through your PowerPoint, time and time again. I think I downloaded that a while back. And as we are restructuring into this new framework internally, I've had to study it back and forth. And the things that I feel like the biggest outcomes I'm looking at it, I'm looking as an advantage for doing all this restructuring work is team recruiting, team retention, team turnover, fixing the turnover, right? Because they have a path. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then most importantly, it's the customer satisfaction, customer experience, which equals retention, right? Improved retention equals, higher dollar value per each customer acquired, which means you can spend more money to acquire customers, which means you can grow faster than your competitors without sacrificing profitability. How is that for a reason?
That's absolutely spot on. And when we go further into the context of some of this restructure, some of the business problems that it does solve is things like recruitment, for example. What you're doing is you're employing more sustainable staff. There's more longevity for the business. You're automatically reducing costs on recruitment and training. You then have a more engaged client because you have more consistency in your service. So you go through all that. Things like covering leave, career progression, it ticks a lot of those boxes as well, particularly cultural alignment. is you get more of a cultural alignment with a high-performing team. People are interested in achieving the same goal for the business. And absolutely, the byproduct is lower staff churn and better customer service. So all around, it seems to tick a lot of boxes.
Excellent. So let's get into it. I think we've sold it enough for our listeners to sort of be anxious in hearing sort of how it works. So if you don't mind, Adam, take us through sort of the concept of existing structure and this new structure.
Absolutely. So in the past, we've worked with a lot of offices that kind of work. In Australia here, we have two kind of very different frameworks. We have what's called the portfolio framework, what we call the portfolio framework, which is basically one property manager looks after a portfolio of properties from start to finish. So they look after all the leasing and the repairs and the maintenance and the inspections, contact with owners, all that sort of stuff. And it is a relatively efficient way of doing business because you have one single point of contact with your owner. We then have what's called a task-based system. And what happens is you then get a group of property managers and you cut them up into looking after specific areas of the property management business. So some people look after letting and inspections, and other people look after repairs and maintenance, and other people look after the core planning around the owner contacts and things like that. So what you end up with these very siloed approach to property management, and there's all these grey areas. You have very confused owners, you have very confused staff, and you lose a lot of efficiency in that. What the problem is with both of those concepts is neither of them provide a career path for the property manager. Neither of them provide any real accountability. And particularly the portfolio structure, which is probably slightly better of the two, is you have all these issues with as soon as a property manager leaves, you lose a lot of your information, a lot of your owner information, and your portfolio information goes out the door with their head. You then have this very large amount of downtime, which is kind of 6 weeks or 2 months, where you're recruiting and trying to train a new property manager to take on that portfolio. You also have a very flat structure in the fact that you have a lot of people reporting to you as a manager. So I've worked in quite a lot of big businesses. In fact, a lot of my history is around going into big businesses and really tidying them up and get them performing again. And one business that I walked into, he had 26 property managers reporting directly to him, and you can't sustain that and manage the business going forward as a leader. So the portfolio structure, again, has these issues around reporting, longevity, recruitment, just covering from leave. So what happened is we found all these issues and we went to work to try and solve them all, which is where the new framework came into play. So the new framework is about creating what we call a pod. So it's still a three-team structure, but what there is there's definitely a hierarchy and seniority in it. And we start with, at the lower level, what we call a property associate, and they're kind of an entry-level role into the business. In the middle of the org chart, we have a property manager, and obviously they're the core heavy day-to-day lifting. And then at the top, we have what's called a property manager executive. So the important thing about this pod is one of the things we learnt from small businesses is in a small business, things often work very efficiently because everyone works quite closely together, and often in the same office. They're probably sitting right next to each other, and there's a lot of efficiency that comes out of that. So one of the things with creating these pods is you kind of get that efficiency back again. But the important thing about this is how the pod actually works, is that you don't silo the task between those three roles. Each of those shares a portion of the task. So let me just use arrears as an example. So the property associate may print the arrears report every morning or analyse the arrears report every morning.
What report? I'm sorry, Adam. Just clarify.
So we have an arrears report
in arrears. Okay, so late payments.
Yeah, late payments. Yeah, Got it. They might pull the late payments report or monitor it. They might actually send text messages or reminders off to those tenants or whatever it is. It will then go to the property manager, and the property manager do the next task. And those tasks are often around experience as well. So the property manager's role would now be to issue any notices that need to go out for rent default or rent arrears and things like that. And then after that, they're finished with it. It would then go to property manager executive. Property manager executive would deal with any escalated cases where there's terminations due and things like that, evictions due. So there's kind of very much a hierarchy in the process of nearly every task in property management. So we can duplicate that into this org chart. But one of the other key things with this org chart is the property manager executive takes on more of a leadership and mentoring role. And what they're doing is they're feeding their knowledge back down into the pod so that those people have now a career path. They're learning from the people above them and they're being able to move up. So you can go from a property manager associate in one pod, and then you can move up to a property manager in another pod next door, or in that pod, as you move through your career. So it's starting now to offer a career path. The property manager executive also takes on the accountability role. So the KPIs are all stopped with the property manager executive. So it's their job to make sure that the team below them are reporting well and working efficiently and making sure that they've got the tools to do that job as well. So that's where the new org chart come in. So you also save all these other things we talked about. So if somebody from that pod leaves, you've still got two people in the pod. So you're not losing any of that knowledge out of the pod. And it's very easy to slip a new person into it, particularly if the property manager left, for example. The PME is now they've been in that role and they're trained up. They've probably covered the property manager during leaves at varying times and taken on extra responsibility. They're ready to move up into that role, which is a natural progression. And then you can actually recruit entry-level role into the business, and that protects your culture. It makes sure that new staff are learning your systems and procedures and that you're not contaminating your business with all that good work that you put into it by bringing an outside mid-level property manager that has their own systems and procedures. It helps glue everything back together. So that's kind of the bigger picture on how this system or this concept came about, on trying to solve all those problems that we talked about before with this new org chart type structure.
Gotcha. So that is pretty cool. That's an interesting. That's a tough nut to crack, as they say. But let's crack it open and start sort of inspecting the components. And then we'll put it back together for the audience. So what you're saying, Adam, correct me if I'm right, and I don't have 100% grasp on it because we're just starting on it. I think I have a decent grasp. But I did want to clarify, before this, I want to clarify one set of terminology. Pod versus squad. Is there a difference?
No, there's not. And unfortunately, as a team, we've been challenging that around. The term pod has been used in the past around that task-based structure that we discussed before very loosely. So we did originally launch it as pod, and I think it might even be pod in the book. But we are definitely changing our concept more to a squad type structure, only because we feel that no one's really claimed that term yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, definitely squad is the way we've been pitching it lately. So that's a great concept.
Gotcha. So yeah, here internally we call the pod, and this was our structure right now. Our current structure is account manager and assistant account manager. In a lot of cases, it goes very parallel. Property management, assistant property manager, right? Property manager, assistant property manager. So that's a pod in our speak here internally, 4.5. That's a pod. A squad is what we're going to, right? And squad is what we're talking about. So I just want to make sure we get that straight. And by the way, you should guys definitely figure out a nice acronym for it, like, squad-based performance team, SPMF, whatever that turns out to be. That's really, it'll be, because I was introducing the topic, Adam, and frankly, I'm like, how do I call this thing?
I agree. We need something for it, don't we?
Yeah, some nice acronym that just sings to you. But, gimmicky it may be, I think, again, it's easier for people to own things that sort of interpret well. And in this case, this interprets really well, except that we don't have the actual name. Well, I call it squad-based structure. So let's just stick with that for now, and then maybe you guys can figure out something else and we'll call it something else. So with that, let me see. I'm just trying to filter 100 of questions that I have and get to one. Specifically, the structure you mentioned is assistant property manager, and property management executive. Do you mind give us a sort of a quick synopsis of each of these positions, kind of what their responsibility levels are?
Absolutely. Let's start in the middle of the org chart. So what we have is a property manager. And I think most agencies kind of understand the concept of a property manager. So we haven't really changed that. Their core role is to manage the property management function of the portfolio, or the squad, let's call it. So their idea is they're skilled up completely in all tasks in property management. But what we say is that there's some inefficiencies in a general property manager where they probably don't have the skills to make leadership decisions or management decisions or decisions that are actually affecting the whole business. So they're kind of isolated into just doing their role. They probably aren't really also engaged in the business as a whole, and what the business is trying to achieve. So what we find is property managers generally work in these little pods, but they're the workhorse of the pod and they do a great job. So we've still kept that role, and it's really important that that is the foundation for the squad. What we've done is we've changed the assistant. So the assistant, which we call the property associate, is basically a junior role. Like with any associate, it's a role that's designed to learn and progress and build into a bigger role. But the key to that is, in the old system, it was like property manager, assistant property manager. Assistant property manager used to do all the garbage, used to palm them, leases draw up and filing to do and all that sort of stuff. And by default, they'd work in that until they could, basically claw their way into a property manager's role. But the key with this is the property associate is designed to learn in that role, but also relieve a bit of the pressure from the property manager. So the property manager can focus more on their core tasks, accountability, meeting their clients' obligations and things like that. So it's very much an entry level role into the business where you can now nurture that, train them in your skills, train them in your systems and procedures, and absolutely get them to embrace in your culture. So that's a really, really important part of the property associate. It's not just an assistant role. It's very much about them growing and evolving to benefit the pod and themselves, or the squad and themselves. So that's the property associate role. And then what we do is we go into the property manager executive role. So we felt there was need for a senior role that was really good in managing the escalated parts of property management. So conflict, overdue repairs, rent default, managing the owners, for example. So in the squad structure, we generally have the property manager executive managing the owner relationship and the property manager managing the tenant relationship. Again, the workhorse really good at getting something done, really good at the relationships with the tenants. But to manage an owner or to manage a landlord, we feel there's just that extra level of knowledge that needs to be there to manage that. So we give that role to the property manager executive. So it's very much a senior role. They're more engaged in the business. They're more understanding of what the business is trying to achieve. And they also have probably what you would almost call leadership qualities, where they have the ability to actually mentor and train people below them. And some property managers don't have that, and that's okay. But for property managers that do have that, let's recognize that and put them into a role where they can use those skills to influence others within the business. So that's kind of the nut of the three roles and why they came about.
Gotcha. Have you heard of... we have here in the U.S., there are three distinct structures of team structures for the property management shops. One is, you mentioned, portfolio. Second is task oriented. They call it something else. I can't remember. I can never remember. It's basically a factory, right? It's a factory, right? With people do widgets and have their own little stations. And the third is hybrid, where a property manager has this quite significant support network. Somebody else does maintenance, and they're in charge of the maintenance. Somebody else does, well, the same late notices, right? Somebody else, like there's these sort of functions within the company, and the property manager still gets to be the face, yet the work happens through those sort of specific functions within the company. Have you heard of that, and is that sort of popular in Australia?
It's not popular in Australia. We do have that. It does happen in Australia. So one of the terms that we like to steer clear of in Australia is senior property manager, because often they get that role from longevity rather than from experience. But what you do find is that sometimes senior property managers go into these businesses and they actually stay there and become quite loyal staff members, which is fantastic. But what happens is that they end up building the team around them, and this is what you've kind of described is sometimes what happens here, is that they get really, really busy, and what they do is they then start employing people below them to take on some of these tasks to help relieve the pressure from them so they can manage the clients. This particularly happens in these situations because the senior doesn't want to give up their relationship with the client. So they've been there for a long time. Perhaps they've actually bought on a lot of those clients themselves and have relationships with them, and they don't want to give those relationships up. So we do see it in Australia. It's not common. It really only happens by default through longevity, but it's definitely not a successful way of doing business. The senior property manager often isn't skilled enough to manage all those different workflows going on, and what you end up is that people start doing their own things. So the leasing consultant kind of just makes up their job as they go along, or the person doing repairs and maintenance just makes it up as they go along, because they don't have the mentoring from the senior property manager that they really need.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so basically what we're finding with that structure is it's really happening by default, which means there's no framework in it. There's no places for people to progress. There's no support for the leader to manage a team because it was never really a recognized structure. So there was no framework put into it.
So those things are true about the progression and KPIs and reporting, which we'll get into again later. But the hybrids are sort of, I think, in my opinion, at this current state in the U.S. are very popular, and a lot of people are moving towards them. And maybe I didn't explain myself right. So, property manager is still the relationship head, and maybe I have, but property manager is the relationship person, but there's a maintenance department. And so whatever they have a maintenance request, maintenance department receives it and solves it, right? The property manager stays abreast of it, but, technically it's the maintenance department's job. There's a leasing department. Leasing department advertises and follows through and does, walkthroughs and inspections in the inspection department. And so the property manager is really just on the phone. I should have put airplane mode. Note to self. The property manager is really on the phone with customers. How does that, does that happen in Australia? You guys have the hybrid? The true hybrid?
No, we don't have a true hybrid. And I think that there's not one size that fits all in property management. I think one of the things that we're pushing here today is more making sure that you have a structure, that you have a framework, and that is documented and supported. So I think it doesn't matter what the framework is. One size doesn't fit all. I think you need to be kind of dynamic in this industry. But I think what the framework what it is making sure you've got a framework in there. So if you're putting a hybrid business in place and you have the framework to make sure that the maintenance people are reporting, that you have the right mechanisms for training and all that sort of stuff around the framework, I think there's no problems in implementing that sort of thing. But definitely not common practice in Australia, no.
Gotcha. In my opinion, for what it's worth, is the squad structure is still vastly superior just because of that team satisfaction, team retention, and also customer experience. Because again, the property manager, if he is sick, she's sick. The maintenance is being handled potentially. The properties are being leased potentially, but there's no accountability. Nobody talking to customers.
Absolutely. So one of the things with our org chart, I rolled it out into a business many years back, and we used very much a trial pod that wanted to work together. They actually kind of volunteered to do the process, and they were all working closely together in their own pods, but they kind of had quite a good relationship and a culture between them. So they put this pod together, and kind of within 3 months of this squad coming together, the property manager, obviously the core role, decided he wanted to go and leave for 6 weeks, and they kind of all panicked and said, "What are we going to do?" And I said to them, "Stop, just wait. This is what this is exactly designed for." So their property manager actually went away for 6 weeks. They did be quite proactive. They made sure all their inspections were up to date and everything was kind of operating at 100% efficiency before he left. But that property manager came back, and there was not one phone call that was ever missed from an owner or a tenant. There was not one piece of work that was done. His emails were looked after, and he came back to a clean desk. And I think that's really, really important, because what you then have is you've had no loss of efficiency in the business whatsoever while he's been away. You've had no reduction of service to your clients, no reduction of service to your tenants. Plus you've also, which is a kind of a different, we won't go too far into this tangent, is property managers often begrudge doing training and taking leave because they come back to this mountain of work on their desk. So you've also got to satisfy a property manager that he's come back and there's nothing there. So this is where this structure, we think, really powers itself to be, really adaptable to the business.
Really good. So I think the department and a hybrid structure still is the best out of the three. If you did not know nothing about this show, if you haven't listened, if you're not a listener, or if you didn't read Ben White's book, if you don't know Adam Hooley, then probably hybrid, in my opinion, sounds good. But what Squad, the way I envision this for my company and my customers as well, what Squad is introducing is this immense sort of lift in team, as well as your customer experience, but also the departments that you have. That, let's say you need a maintenance department because you've reached certain volume and the requests are just endless, and the work is sort of consistent and you know exactly what to do. Or maybe it's the inspection department, whatever. I think those can be sort of truly handled by VAs or virtual assistants. In a lot of ways, if it's a procedural work that you do a lot of, or property condition reports, whatever those are, the VAs can handle that, and the squads can choreograph the whole thing And I think, in my opinion, this is the structure of the dream team, right? Of a company that's positioned to grow and accept scale as sort of new opportunities come. So we want to go, Adam, I want to go to KPIs next. So, shuffle up your notes and get yourself in that position that, key performance indicators and how do you actually measure, and I'm keenly interested in this, how do you measure success? But let me talk about my sponsor while you shuffle your notes. So my first sponsor today, there's two sponsors that brought this show to you. I'm talking about the PM Growth Summit. I am one of the co-founders of the PM Growth Summit. And guys, at this show, you'll find out all the latest information. So I wanted to say, firstly, it's the conference for the property management entrepreneurs looking to grow their business. That's it. We're going to focus on growth, but growth has many flavors. Growth has the team structure. Growth has the culture, team culture. Growth has, marketing and sales, and of course, all those things. Now, the speakers we're bringing, the speaker lineup this year is going to be amazing. Well, firstly, Adam is going to speak. And I'm quite excited about that. So he's traveling from Australia, all the way from Australia, to talk to us on this team structure concept. So get your questions ready. He'll be hanging out in the VIP room, and sort of you can kind of bounce ideas off of him. Marcus Sheridan, no quantity, last year best speaker. Victor Antonio, really good speaker, keynote speaker in terms of sales and helping you put together a sales process. Jason Goldberg, great guy, my personal coach, amazing speaker, TED speaker, TED level speaker. Andrew Props, Bob Walters, also from Australia, LPMA. Casey McDonald's going to speak, also from Australia. We got a lot of people from Australia, Adam. You guys,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
You are guys, in my opinion, quite advanced in organizational structure. Bit behind on tech, but way more advanced in organizing systems. And part of the reason I think you have a lot of consultants that sort of, and I was jokingly saying that, hey, you guys should have a conference for consultants for the property managers. So and because of all that thinking going on, and people that are working on the business for these property management companies, I think that's the reason the structures and the systems are more advanced than what we have here. But one other thing about the PM Growth Summit, guys, and you can go to pmgrowthsummit.com, www.pmgrowthsummit.com, get the ticket. One more thing, I'm going to introduce another speaker we just booked. He's a founder of Duct Tape Marketing, and his name is John Jantz, immensely popular, one of the biggest names in small business marketing, true entrepreneur. I'm very excited to have him on. So he's going to speak at the PM Growth Summit as well. So guys, we include all of your food, beverages, drinks, parties, and the education, as well as recorded sessions, slides, and notes. All of that is part of the ticket price. We want to control your experience completely. When you get to that conference, your job is to get a plane ticket, book a hotel, get there. We'll take care of everything else. Go to pmgrowthsummit.com, get your ticket, and we'll see you in January 2018. All right, Adam, you ready for the KPI?
Yep, pumped.
Back and forth? All right. So as a business owner, restructuring into squads, I have some sort of notions that this is going to work well. I have really good sort of projections that it's going to work well. But what do I need to keep track of to measure and understand the impact this structure is having on my business, and the impact it's having on my customers, and maybe my bottom line?
I think with the KPIs in the business, there's three definite silos that you need to keep a track of. So you've got your customer-facing measurements, making sure that you're delivering on what you're promising. Then you have your team measurements, which are making sure that your team are doing what they're responsible for. And then, of course, you have your financial goals, which is kind of wrapped around the top. But there's definitely three things that you need to focus on. The NPS one, which is kind of really, really important, we put that in place years ago. Now, that's not obviously, that's the Net Promoter Score. That's obviously not ours. It was just something that we took and ran with because we believed in it. We found it really, really important to measure what your customer is getting from you. So a lot of people, they were really good at KPIs, putting performance KPIs in for their business and measuring on what they were delivering, coming up with their point of difference, all this really cool stuff that you work on in a business, making sure that, but is anyone ever starting to measure what your customer is seeing. Are you actually delivering what you say you're going to deliver? And that's where the front side of it, the NPS that we kind of preach for, measuring your customer service, that's where that comes into play. Now, the reason, without kind of plugging NPS, you can use any survey tool that you like, but what we find with NPS is you need to be able to benchmark that as a business so you can learn from it, so you can measure it, you can grow. And NPS offers that benchmarking program where you can actually do your survey results and measure improvement on your business. So just sending out, a 5-question survey doesn't do a lot. It does give you feedback on where you can improve and what you're delivering on, but you can't measure on that. It's really, really important that you can measure something so that you can measure improvement on it, so you can celebrate it as a team.
Go ahead.
The other one, the second one was the key performance indicators. So I have a list of about 20. We have a spreadsheet at the office which actually has 100 in them, which we've put together as a team. But I have a list of about 20 core ones which I generally use when I go into a business. Now, to me, you need to, as a property management business, you need to have at least 10 KPIs. Many of the businesses I walk into, I go, what are your KPIs? And they say, we need to keep our arrears or a default to a set level. And I've gone, that's awesome, because that's kind of a good focal point in your business. But what about all these other things? What about your lease expiries? What about your periodic inspections? What about your overdue invoices from tenants? All this other stuff that you need to be measuring in the business to make sure the business is operating. Now, from a manager's perspective, you can do that from your chair. Now, I'm not advocating at all that you don't actually go and speak to your staff, but one of the most important things is you can identify very quickly through managing these KPIs in trend graphs where things are going pear-shaped. And one of the examples that I often use is in some of the states here in Queensland, they've had very buoyant rental markets for many, many years. And what happened is the rental market fell and the days vacant on market increased from average 14 days to nearly 60 days. And all the KPI figures demonstrated that. So what it did is it demonstrated for the business manager that I have an overall business problem here. So we identified the business problem. The business problem was that the property managers didn't know how to negotiate rent reductions because they'd never had to do it before. So you can clearly identify very quickly what's happening within your business and how to rectify those problems. It's the same with an individual team member. If you see an individual team member start to spear off in their KPIs, you recognise it instantaneously. And then you can work out, is it that they're having problems at home and neglecting their work, or do they need to improve in their role? So I think that's one of the key things with KPIs. It's really easy to mark improvement for your team. Where are the areas that you're not improving on at the moment, and how can I help you improve on those? Where are the areas that you're actually doing really well on, and how can we celebrate those? And in many instances, we use this thing called champions, which we use from the KPI model, is that if you're really, really good at something, say you're really good at arrears or rent default, then you would be the person that trains new team members on that particular thing, because you'll now set the benchmark for the business. So it's now using the KPIs to recognise good and help to improve bad. And I found in many offices that I've been into where normally you would just retrench or sack a staff member that's not performing, once they've introduced these KPIs or these performance indicators for their teams, what they've found is they can now identify the key areas where the staff's not performing, and they can help improve those areas. And in many instances, those staff weren't forced out of the business anymore. They were actually engaged into the business because they were given the support they needed to grow and improve. So the team KPIs tick kind of several different boxes there. They're making sure that your team are identifying areas of your team for improvement, but also that they're increasing efficiency in your business. So that one's really, really important. And I have been into businesses where they've increased their KPI from 5 out of 20 to 18 out of 20 as an office average. And at 5 out of 20, it was a very reactive business. People were just stumbling over their feet. The phones were ringing madly, lots of emails coming in, and they were really just dealing with the person that was yelling the loudest. And at 18 out of 20 and 17 out of 20, and you can probably sympathise with that, Alex, because you've probably spoken to heaps of businesses that are like that. They just can't get past it. They don't understand why their phones won't stop ringing. Once you actually get to that 17 and 18 out of 20, what you're finding is the efficiency has increased so much in your business that there is actually time now to go and have team lunches, to play cricket up the hall and muck around and have chit-chat around the water cooler. And I think that's really, really important for your culture, not only for your team, but as your leader. I remember years ago as a leader, I used to begrudge my team standing around the water cooler chatting. It was like a waste of time for me. But once we kind of got the team to a level where they were efficient, I used to encourage it. I embraced it. So there's very much a difference in culture once you've got this high-performing team in place and you're measuring them with these KPIs.
Very interesting. So a couple things I want to add to this, and correct me. Like, feel free to just jump in and correct me, because again, I'm working off of your model and making it my own. So, number one, the property manager, the PME, the property management executive, the guy or the gal who's heading up the squad is responsible for KPIs. So, as a business owner, you're gonna get that report delivered to you, right? That's the expectation.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's one, and they will be sort of responsible for compiling the numbers and keeping those up, and that is huge help, right? As a business owner, you can't have your fingers at everything, and that takes immense amount of time. Secondly, you mentioned about NPS. I do want to present an alternative, though. NPS is something that we're just learning to implement ourselves here, and we're not even there yet. This is on the list of things that we're going to do, just not quite rolling out right now, but. In my opinion, one way, the easiest possible way to measure impact and customer experience, is measuring your reviews. I mean, literally, if you're on 4.5 and you do constant reputation surveys all the time, you can see your average is quite easy on the Reputation.com platform that we provide. But even if you don't need to be, right. Just go into your Google and Yelp, averages, and take the benchmark today, restructure into squads, right, as you restructure, and see what the impact is, and take the next 12 months reviews, and you'll have a really, really good measure. If your average business rating is 3.5 stars, what if it goes to 4.5, or what if it goes to 4? Then you'll know, as at least you have sort of validated true customer reactions. Tenants are happy, owners are happier, therefore you get better reviews. I know that's just a thought out there. If people don't have, or businesses don't have any sort of NPS or any other kind of surveys, that's another way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Again, Alex, what I guess I like to pitch is a framework. As long as you've got a framework and a measurement that you can measure improvement on, that's all you need. And that's a really good example because it's so easy to do. Any business can implement that.
Yeah, and honestly, we all live and die by our customer reviews, by our public customer reviews. So it will be a good benchmark to take a snapshot of as you embark on this restructuring, and then going back and measuring against it. All right, so let's talk about my second sponsor, and when we come back, we're gonna sort of finish up with how to implement the system. Let's say we're sold on this. Let's say this is something we want to make a move on. How do I do it? Do I take steps? And what are the baby steps? And if I don't want to take steps, I just want to do it. How do I do it? So, Adam, if you want to talk about that in just a minute, that'd be great. But in the meantime, I want to talk about one big problem that I find a lot of my customers are in, and that is, in fact, every small business in this bucket, right? And this bucket is underspending on marketing. If you underspend on marketing, you cut the opportunity size for your business quite significantly. In fact, most of my clients I speak with usually spend anywhere from 2 to 4%, 3% on marketing. And that's usually the guys who grow pretty fast, right? The majority of businesses don't even spend that much. And the reason why I just finally came together for me, the reason why businesses don't spend on marketing, and my dad owns a small deli, and he doesn't market at all, and I couldn't understand, like, what are you doing, Dad? Your son is like running a marketing company. You could at least send some postcards, man, and he wouldn't. And so what I understood is this: there's a lot of brouhaha out there, and there's a lot of high octane marketing individuals screaming at you. And by the way, high octane marketing individuals, I'm coining that term into HOMI, right? HOMI. And these guys are screaming at you. And the thing is, you probably taken them up on it, and you've probably fell down on your face and lost a good amount of money. So 1 for the HOMI, 0 for you, right? So essentially, the business owners are worried about, putting that money in the dumpster, right? They're getting cheated. This marketing is the last sort of frontier where the salesman knows more than a business owner. And that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge. But in reality, this costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars in opportunity. Let me give you an example. Company A spends $50,000 a year on marketing, gets 70 new management contracts. Company B spends $20,000 on marketing, only gets 30 new managements per year. You know what the difference is in annual contract value? In other words, how much money you didn't get this year? $100,000 exactly, right? The difference is vast. The problem is that for a person who are only spending $20,000 to make a leap to $50,000, they need to know that that money is actually being spent on something that works, right? So the market is too fragmented, too complicated, too loud, and too risky for a normal business owner to do. So I've decided to step in and do something about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do CMO strategic level consulting. Me personally, Alex, going to do this. I'm going to put together a marketing plan with an execution blueprint so you know exactly what channels to deploy, how to deploy them, and where and how to do it. You know, unit economics modeling. So once you have a marketing plan, you got to figure out how do you forecast for success, how do you measure success, and unit economics get down all the way to a single property level, what the profitability is, what the income is, and so on. So you know exactly what each property is worth to you. And then we're going to talk about your fee structure and remodel your fee structure to be more competitive, to get more add-on value-add services into your sort of into your client base, and introduce these other fees that you can actually bring value to your clients and make money on. We're going to talk about the whole pre-sale customer experience from the first phone call or from the first visit to the website all the way down to them signing a contract. What is that experience? We're going to basically put it out on a map and rethink it, restructure it to make sure the customer experience is flawless from the beginning to end. And also we're going to have some optional CMO level quarterly strategy calls. Anyway, that's going to be expensive. So, you know, we're talking about $5,000 for a full day. So if you're interested, send me an email, alex@4.5.com. I'll send you a questionnaire, an intake form to make sure it's right for you. You know, it depends where you are in the stage of your business. You may not need this. I want to make sure that you truly do need this, and this is truly going to be a win-win scenario. And if it is, you know, I'd love to work with you. So let me know. Anyway, Adam, sorry for this break. Let's get back into it. How do you implement squad structure?
Very good question. So one of the things, a lot of people grab this with two arms and run with it, which I think is really, really exciting. But one of the things is really, really important is don't go back to your office and sack your team and start again. That's definitely not what you want to accomplish here. You really want to plan this out. And with a lot of offices that I work with, what we do is we actually get index cards out and we put their existing team on the board, and then we work out who we can move around, who's growing quicker than others. Potentially you might have team members that are flagged to leave for maternity leave or partners being transferred or whatever it is. But the idea is that as you roll this out, you take advantage of the coming climate to leverage off that. What you do find is you've always got someone, you've got a property manager that's really happy just to be a property manager. You've got an assistant property manager that really wants to progress and do really well. You've got a leasing consultant perhaps that was stuck in a leasing consultant role and really wants to move in property management. You've got all these dynamic things happening in your business, and the idea is to leverage off those dynamic things. One of the worst things you can do is just go in and tell your team, right, I'm changing everyone around, and just uproot them, because that's not going to do anything for your culture whatsoever. It's also not leveraging off the assets of the business. So I think for me, really, really important is to actually plan this out. And if you're an office of 2 or 3 people, you know, it could take 6 months, it could take 12 months to get this right. But the important thing is that you have a vision, you share it with your team, and you have a plan in place for it. Now, some of that plan, obviously, you're not going to share the whole lot with your team. You know, there might be team members in there that probably aren't performing, and you're going to use part of your new framework to move them on and replace them with better. And that's part of the restructuring of your team, using those opportunities. Now, in Australia, we have, I'm not sure about over in the States, we have at the moment quite a high property management turnover, and for all the reasons that we've talked about. So when you're restructuring your team, often you can guarantee that kind of a percentage of them will leave on their own accord. You will often find, and the good news is you'll often find that people don't want to be involved in this process. We find that there are property managers that feel they're really good at their role, and they don't feel that they need to be transparent, that they need to be monitored, and they need to report KPIs, which is absolutely fine. Because if you're changing your business and you want to work like this and you want to become a high-performing team, you want to make sure that the team are on board with you. And if they're not, then they need to go somewhere else. That's best for them, and it's best for your business. So all parties are suited. So to me, I think the really important part about it is not just diving in, to plan ahead, engage your team, and progress into it over a period of time. If you're a smaller business, and I know in the States you have a lot of smaller businesses, which is awesome. You've got people starting up and wanting to grow their rent rolls. I think that's fantastic. And I think if you can bed this into your business from day one, and to me, the first role into the business is probably the property manager. Now, there's kind of other big conversations we can have about if you're focusing on growth and things like that. You know, where do you put a growth team? And there's lots of other stuff to talk about. But I think if we just isolate things to the property management team at the moment, is the property manager is probably the core role to put in first. Don't put, a lot of people put an assistant in or put an associate in because they want to save on cash. Well, you want to actually put the right person in the role to grow that business to start with, and it's really important that the property manager goes in. Then I would then put the property associate underneath, and that starts protecting that property management role in case the property manager leaves. You've got someone coming into the business and you're mentoring them. And then as your business grows, then that property manager can move into the property manager executive's role, the property associate into the property manager's role, and you can recruit. And you can start seeing how the dynamics of the pod start to grow and remain in ownership of the original property manager. The culture then evolves into what they want it to be rather than what other people are bringing into the business. So there are different, depending on your business size, there are different ways of doing this. So I've worked with businesses with 30-odd staff. It's taken nearly 2 years to transition into the squad structure. And I've worked in businesses with 1 and 2 staff, and they've been able to do it relatively quickly. But I think the key is, as I said, don't go and sack your staff, or don't go back and just say to your team, right, I've got this great new structure, I'm redoing everything, unless the team can do that. I have been into businesses with 6 or 7 staff, and the team were just weirdly structured in a way that it was just very natural to move into that structure. There are a couple of seniors, there are a couple of juniors, there are a couple of good, solid property managers, and they were able to move really, really quickly. But don't force it. Let the opportunities arise for you.
That is a very, very interesting and good advice. So I love your startup advice. You know, grow into it by hiring a property manager, then bring somebody, an assistant, to protect, as you say, that position in case they leave. You have somebody could step in, and then sort of bring in, promote your people within, and then bring in another junior role to keep learning, and then start building the second squad. That is really good. I like that sort of progression for growing. And you know, in our case, we're gonna move pretty quickly because we are in that situation. As you said, we have a number of senior people, number of sort of really, really solid people who are, you know, not quite senior, but sort of ready to go that way. That's where they want to aim, and they need a career path. Otherwise, they're tapped out right now. And then we have a lot of people who are junior, new, who just coming in from college and learning this. So for us, it's natural. But I you're right. And I think if when you come to speak at the PM Growth Summit, if you can sort of bring in more of that implementation wisdom, that will be great. So spend some time on talking about the specific methodologies for bringing, like, say, a 10, 12 person team into that structure. How would you do it? What would be Q1, Q2, Q3 would look like, right? So they said it's going to take a year. So what are the specific tasks within each sort of month, each quarter, to move in that direction? Because I think it's a brilliant structure. I think it's going to take hold. I think the winners are going to sort of get there quicker than everyone else. But unfortunately for us, we're out of time. I mean, we've been talking for 52 minutes, and that's been, we just sort of really just scratched the surface, honestly. So, Adam, do you mind giving me a link for the book so people can go and read about this more deeply?
Absolutely. I've got one for you. You can actually order a hard copy off Amazon, or you can just download a copy for free. So I'll send you that link to download. Absolutely, there's no problems there at all.
Excellent. So, guys, for you who are listening, we'll put this into the 4.5 website show notes or an article below this podcast, and you'll be able to download this resource at no cost, courtesy of what's the company?
LPMA is the company. The books actually come out under Atmosphere. We publish them under an older brand of ours. So don't get confused with that. But that's where all the thought leadership is, under the Atmosphere. But LPMA is the business that I work for.
So leading property managers of Australia, and also Ben White and Adam Hooley. Adam, thank you kindly for your time today. This was educational, inspiring, and I'm quite excited about this this new structure, and I think we all got a lot of it out of it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Alex.